Saludos a toda la afición de Lucha Libre Online. Este que les habla es Michael Morales Torres, integrante del equipo de Lucha Libre Online. Y tenemos el enorme privilegio de presentarles a nuestro invitado especial en la noche de hoy, de Orlando, Florida, para el mundo, ex superestrella de la NWA, de WCW, de WWF. Randy Hogan llega aquí con su Randy Mania a Lucha Libre Online. Randy, it is an honor for us to have you as our guest, sir. How are you doing today?
I am just wonderful. You have made my day by being here, part of your show, reaching out to your fans and your audience. I'm so excited right now. I could just rip my shirt off, but I won't.
Don't do it. It's beautiful. It's a great shirt. Randy, we thank you very much for being here. And I wanted to start this interview asking you, how did you got hooked with professional wrestling initially on your young days? So when you were a kid or when you were a teenager, you know, what was the thing that caught your attention enough to do this for a living?
Well, you know, it's funny because doing this in reverse, I never wanted to do this for a living. It just happened. When I was a young boy, 7, 8 years old, I was raised in Detroit, Michigan, and my grandparents were big, big fans. And they used to take me to the wrestling matches. My parents didn't care much for it. My grandparents were just hooked on it. They were on the edge of their seat watching it every Saturday morning. And they would take me to the matches when they would come in Detroit. Now, I was raised, of course, old school, watching stars like the original Sheik, Bobo Brazil, Dick the Bruiser, Killer Kowalski, Flying Fred Curry, and Wild Bull Curry, and the original Stomper, and just everybody. I had seen the original Gorgeous George come through, Lou Thez go through, Pat Patterson. Wow. So I was just raised my whole life loving professional wrestling. Never thought about doing it. I didn't wrestle amateur in school or anything, but I was and still am the world's biggest fan. So I used to play in a band, and we used to travel all over the eastern part of the United States. And I was working in Columbus, Georgia at a Holiday Inn. And Wednesday nights is when they did TV taping for the old Jim Crockett's NWA. And they would stay at the Holiday Inn where I was working. So week after week, I would get to know people like Wahoo McDaniel, Eddie Mansfield, the Continental Lover, guys like that. So again, just being a big fan, and I got to know, like I said, Eddie Mansfield very well. I still keep in touch with him. And it just got me more hooked on it. So Eddie used to go to a gym in Columbus called Oates Brothers, Jerry Oates. They were Ted and Jerry Oates were kind of a regional favorite. They did a lot in Japan and nationwide, but they were really big in the area, and Jerry owned a gym there. So I started going to the gym in my afternoons with Eddie, just working out. So then Eddie went back on the road and went out to Texas, big feud with Scott Casey, I believe it was at the time. Anyways, I had moved around down to Florida. I was in the restaurant business. So I was working in South Florida at a restaurant, and they closed. And I said, you know, this wrestling stuff is still in my mind. I just want to know if it's real or if it's fake. So I called Jerry Oates back in Columbus, Georgia. I said, Jerry, do you know anybody that trains down here? He said, well, only Hiro Matsuda, who trained Lex Luger, that other Hogan guy, Hulk, you know, and worked with Mike Graham and Eddie Graham and those guys. So he said, you know, it's really hard to get in. He said, but you know, I train people up here, which I knew he did. So I packed everything I had and moved back to Columbus, Georgia, got a job managing a restaurant, and that paid for my wrestling school. So I started going with Jerry, and he had Marty Jannetty, who had just gotten out of the school and started working regularly. So he was like a little training partner type guy once in a while. And then they had a match, a students match for the Police Athletic League that we were on. And it was a freebie. And, you know, we knew we were just wrestling each other who we were familiar with. And I said, wow, this is really fun. So at this point, I thought I knew it all. Okay, I went through school. I had a match. I know everything. Oh, Lord, was I wrong on that one, brother. So I went to see the matches in Columbus, Georgia, on a Wednesday night, and the guy that I trained with was putting up the ring. And I said, Bill, what are you doing? He says, well, when they're in town here, they rent my ring. He says, are you doing anything? And I says, no, because I had no ambition to wrestle. He said, well, I'm wrestling in this little bar. He said, once in a while. He said, why don't you bring your stuff and come up with me? And I said, well, I'm not going to bring my stuff, but I'll come up with you. So I went a few matches. And then a month later or so, I took my bag with me. And somebody didn't show up. So the promoter guy, the guy with a cigar, now you're in a bar, and there's probably 20 soldiers in there, and that was the whole crowd. I mean, it was big. You talk about the old handshake and a hot dog day. I didn't even get the hot dog. So now here I go. I think I know it all. And I was wrestling as Randy Franklin because my dad's name was Frank. So he said, the promoter went to Bill and said, Bill, your buddy want to wrestle tonight? And of course, Bill said, well, sure he does. He didn't even ask me. So he said, go get your stuff. I said, okay. So I got dressed up. He says, you're going to wrestle this guy called Animal, and he's going to go over. Oh. So I go back in the locker room. I said, okay. So I said, hey, Bill, I said, I'm wrestling this guy Animal, and he's going to go over. Does that mean he's going over the top rope? I'm going over the top rope. He says, no, dummy. That means he's going to win. Oh, okay. That's how green I was.
Oh, wow.
But I was so fortunate to be trained old school. Your first week, you're just learning how to lock up, and mat wrestling, you don't learn ropes, you don't learn kicks, punches, all these monkey spots they do nowadays. You don't learn none of that stuff. You learn to wrestle. And I'm very fortunate I could do that. Anyways, I get in a match with this Animal dude, and he wins, and the promoter says, good job. Can you come back next week? I said, well, okay, I'll come back next week too. So he said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to call you Hal Hogan. And you're going to be Hogan's brother or cousin or something. So I thought about it a while. I said, okay. I said, I'll tell you what. Can we not call me Hal? Because I don't know who the hell they're talking about. Can I use Randy? He said, okay, you're Randy Hogan, and you're going to be his nephew. I said, okay. So I went home that night. Went to my girlfriend and said, honey, I got to be blonde. So I bleached my hair. Now, I always had the tan, okay? I always had the mustache since I was like 18 years old. But it was, dark brown because I was always, a young guy at the time. So I said, I got to do this Hogan thing. So I bleached my hair blonde, my eyebrows, my mustache, and everything. So that's how Randy Hogan got started. So I wrestled up there, and then common courtesy, when you're wrestling with the other wrestlers and they're wrestling another show, you go to support them, on your off days and that. And again, as a courtesy, when somebody does that, you automatically introduce that person, your friend, to the promoter. So you do and say, yeah, if you can use me at any time, la-di-da-di-da, and then you get maybe a match on his card and a match on another one. So at this point, I was smartened up pretty much. I was doing the Hogan thing, never claimed to be nothing to do with Hulk Hogan. I had turquoise trunks, a black sequin robe, turquoise lining, turquoise boots, everything. It didn't do none of this gimmick stuff, this Hogan stuff. But people always said, gee, you look like Hulk Hogan. Are you related to him? Well, I'm whatever you want me to be. You want me his brother, his cousin? No, I'm not related. It's showbiz. Whatever you want me to be, brother, I'll be. So I went through that, got on a match once where they used to bring in a big name for the main event. Not a big name, but like a Greg Valentine at the time, or they had Medusa as the women. And one was a guy called Action Mike Jackson. Now, Mike Jackson was on AEW a few months back. 70 years old, can still go. Anyways, he was in the main event. I was in the semi-main. I said, Mike, how do you get on TV? Because he was on TV every week. And he said, well, I'll tell you. He says, I take a lot of guys up there to work. He used to be a booker for the booker. They would book the matches. And if they needed, at the time, jobbers, they'd say, Mike, bring me 3 guys, bring me 4 guys, whatever. So I started going with him every Wednesday. We'd travel up to Atlanta, which was about an hour's drive. And they do the TV taping. Now, you talk about a kid in a candy shop. First time I walked in a locker room, I got Ricky Steamboat, I got Dusty Rhodes. I got Ric Flair. I got the Midnight Express and Jimmy Cornette. I had Paulie Dangerously, or Paul Heyman, as he goes by now. And all these big name guys, Terry Funk. So I'm like a kid in a candy shop. I mean, again, I'm still that 7-year-old fan. And now all my heroes, I'm sitting right next to them in the same locker room. But you got to be cool. So I'm sitting in the corner with some of the other jobbers, feeling totally out of place. And the best gentleman of the whole bunch was Terry Funk. He walked across the room, looked you right in the eye, put his hand out and said, "My name's Terry Funk. What's your name?" And he says, "I just want to thank you for all you do for us," meaning the jobbers, you know, enhancing them, whatever you want to call it. And that was class. That was just kind of relaxed everybody. So my first match I get on, it was the same thing. I go up there and somebody didn't, they were short a guy, say, "Hogan, get dressed." J.J. Dillon was the booker at the time. So he says, "You're going to wrestle." Now this is on TV, okay, WTBS. It was NWA at the time, Jim Crockett's. And he said, "You're going to wrestle the Warlord and the Barbarian."
Oh, shit.
I never seen nobody so big in my life, these two guys. So I get in the match, it's a tag match, and I get in, and I'm in with the Barbarian. And he's beat me up, of course. So he's going to shoot me in the ropes. So he shoots me off and says, "Boo-boo." I said, "What?" You know, I'm thinking to myself, now I'm nervous. First time on TV, scared to death. The adrenaline's running, brother. So I hit them ropes 100 miles an hour, came off, not knowing what it was. Next thing I know, I got this size 15 in my face. Broke my nose, blood splatting all over the place. So I get back, and anyways, what it did was the Barbarian said, "Big boot," like watch for the big boot, you know. But he's, I think he's Tongan, not Samoan, but very heavy accent. So "boo" was big boot to him. To me, it was just "boo." So I guess they took pity on me, and J.J. Dillon come over and says, you know, "Hogan, you want to come back next week?" Oh, yes, you know, because now I'm making some decent money, and I'm in the room with my heroes, much less wrestling against them. So that's how the whole thing. And then when Jim Crockett sold to Ted Turner and turned it to WCW, had Jim Herd and Eric Bischoff, a lot of guys in there. Now, instead of just being a jobber or enhancement or whatever you want to call them, they wanted people who knew how to work. So a lot of the guys disappeared. You almost had to audition again in matches. And because I was trained the right way and could wrestle either as a heel or a baby face, if we got the chance to actually wrestle from that. So that's how my career got started with that. So then you start with doing TV 3 hours every Wednesday. Then they say, "Well, can you go do a house show?" So, well, sure. So now you start doing the house shows. Now, remember, there was territories at the time. So they were doing house shows everywhere and TV tapings at the house shows. So then they say, "Well, can you travel?" I said, "Well, yeah." So now instead of just being in the Georgia area in Charlotte, where they were located, now you get to go up north, up to Michigan, down to Miami, all over. And did that for a number of years. Loved every minute of it. Got to wrestle all my heroes. Sting, Lex Luger, that whole era. I was in the ring with all of them. And the only one that I didn't like, rest his soul, was Vader. Vader was a monster. He would hurt you for real. And the worst thing about it, he didn't care. So not a lot of things good to say about him. Everybody else was good. You got some stiff guys at the time, as they said, like Rick Steiner. Kevin Sullivan was a little stiff one at the time when he had his thing. Of course, the Road Warriors, they had just come from AWA, and they didn't know this stuff was fake yet, you know. So when they hit you on the back with an arm or something, it was like hitting you with a telephone pole. But I got to wrestle all of them, and I have such great, great memories. So up to date, I hurt my shoulder, or cracked my clavicle in a match with Rick Steiner. So that kind of put me out. So I moved from Georgia down to Florida, where my parents lived. and healed up and bought a restaurant. So now the newspaper picks up and says, professional wrestler Randy Hogan just bought this Cedar River seafood restaurant. So now here I am having to keep Randy Hogan alive again. So I kept bleaching the hair, everything else, had little 5x7 pictures I would autograph and give to the kids. I was like a Ronald McDonald. So when mom and dad want to go out and eat, and they say to the kids, where do you want to go? Oh, let's go see Randy Hogan. It was a business thing. It worked out really well for me. Well, then WCW started doing TV taping. They left Atlanta and started doing it down here at Disney Studios, MGM Studios it was at the time. So I made a couple of phone calls. So again, to stay relevant for my restaurant, when they did TV taping, I would do all the TV tapings here in Orlando, which was about 30 minutes from where I live. So that kept me on again for another, 3 years or so, through I think 94 or 95. And then the business started changing a little bit. Vince was buying everybody out. WCW was still hanging on there, and the next thing you know, they're selling. So it was quite a ride, and I loved it. So I did nothing for maybe 15 years or so after I was done. Hurt my shoulder, couldn't do it no more. Now I was in my 40s, getting older. And am I talking too much, brother?
No, brother. This is
okay.
I'm simply amazed.
No, I'm almost done here. So I get a call from a promoter. Says, hey, would you like to do a convention? Now, I'd never been to a convention. I'd never been to a Comic-Con. I don't even know what conventions are. So he says, yeah. He said, we want you to come in, and we'll pay your flight and your room, and we'll pay you X amount of dollars. And you do this, and basically, you're signing pictures, giving autographs, whatever else. I said, okay, cool. He says, hey, do you have any of that Hulk Hogan type gimmick stuff? No, but I'm darn sure going to get some. So next thing I did, I went out, had some t-shirts made. Randomania, okay. And I did everything in the red and yellow, or yellow and red. That was what I started with just those t-shirts and some promo pictures. So that led to the convention thing. And then and that was up in New York. And then I did the second day, and then now I do 1 or 2 a month through the busy month. I just got back from Atlantic City last week, and I was in Baltimore a few weeks before that, and in Jacksonville, Florida here before that. I got something coming up in New York next month, and in New Jersey. So conventions are really good. They keep me relevant. They keep me excited about the business, because now, I just turned 70, okay? And there's not a whole lot of old guys left. We lost Paul Orndorff today, who was 71.
Unfortunately.
So there's not a lot of them left. So all of a sudden now some of the old guys are getting relevant because they were stars in the old days. I wasn't a star, but I was on TV every week for a number of years. So people know me, know regardless of if I was getting my brains beat out, I was on TV. So to them, I'm a star. And these collectors, they want to know not only the big names and get their autographs, but they want the little guys that help make them big guys. And I was one of them little guys. One of those, as far as WCW goes, I was a jobber. But a lot of people are offended by that term, and that really bothers me. I'm not. You got a job. I got a job. We go to work, we get paid for it. So we're all jobbers, aren't we? We're an enhancement talent, they call us. Well, our job was to enhance our opponent, whether they're a bad guy or a good guy or a technical wrestler or whatever else, it's up to us to enhance them. Another term they use, carpenter. Why is that? Because we built the stars like a carpenter. And star maker, self-explanatory. We helped make these guys stars, which is why it was so important that very first day that Terry Funk came over and said, thank you for what you do for us. Nobody else has ever said that except him. So that's the whole Hogan story. Now I've got a whole line of stuff I sell on my website, which is Randy Hogan Stuff on Facebook. I got t-shirts now. I got them in red, yellow, royal blue, black, and I've got the old the NWO shirt. Well, mine is HWO. It says Hogan's World Order. It's got a signature on the bottom of it. I sell the bandanas, yellows, reds, blues, and blacks. I got red, white, black, and blue sunglasses. I got, from Hulk Hogan, brother, hanging and banging. I got little 2-pound dumbbells, that you can use. And what a handle is, it's that black neoprene. And I autograph those too. I got keychains. I got all this kind of stuff. And all that developed from that vendor who about 2 years ago said, can you do some kind of a Hogan gimmick? And it stuck and it worked. So, man, that's my whole story, brother.
Can you repeat the website once again for all the people out here that are listening to us right now that want to be part of this random mania movement that started 2 years ago, but in reality, it started way before. I mean, you've been active since 81. So can you repeat your website again? Where can people get your products?
This is so simple, Michael. Let me tell you, if you want any Randy Hogan stuff, go on Facebook and go into Randy Hogan stuff. It's that simple. I am on that computer all day long, brother. Daytime, nighttime, in between. They can direct message me, private message me, whatever. I give them prices. I do bulk deals. And if they just want to say hi and ask a question, I'm always available for the fans. Always. I'm the most accessible talent, as they call us, in the business, in the whole Randomania stratosphere, brother.
Brother, your story is amazing because the interesting part is that most of this stuff is you cannot find it and on the internet, you cannot find it on the biography. It is what you lived, and that's what's so beautiful about your story. And I wanted to ask you about, on the early days of Jim Crockett Promotions, things were a lot different than what they are right now in terms of how they book people, the creativity behind it, and how wrestlers were, wrestlers. Can you talk a little bit about your time on Jim Crockett Promotions? How do you felt, when that backstage ambience, the Terry Funk was,
sure.
An incredible deal. But can you, talk about that a little bit?
Well, I try not to sound like an old man. Okay. And again, I'm old school because that's what I did in my era, but I keep up with today's product. And I was there and watching the transition back in the old Crockett days, and even before the Crockett days. Men were men. You wrestled. If you went in a bar and there was a wrestler in there, you knew he was a wrestler. He may be Dick the Bruiser or a Bruno Sammartino or somebody, but they're big, they're huge, they're larger than life. Now you go into a bar and you're sitting next to a kid who weighs 170 pounds named Darby Allin or something, and they don't. I'm not picking on him. He's very talented for what he does, okay? And you could go through a Darby Allin or a Ricochet or dozens of other ones, okay? You don't see a lot of Braun Strowmans anymore or big guys like that. So back in the day, it was rougher. One thing that, and again, for all the young wrestlers out there, I think it still holds true. The secret to working steady is you don't bitch and whine. You don't complain. I don't care if you get hurt. I don't care what you do. You go back in the locker room. You thank your opponent for the match. You maybe a little discussion, and that's it. Now, you can go home and tell your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your dog, whatever it is, about how mean they were and how they hurt you and everything else, but you never say that around in the business. And those are the people that want to work. In the Crockett days, the over guys, as I call them, the stars, they usually had a little say-so in who they wrestled on TV. One of my buddies there, George South. Ric Flair loved to wrestle George South. George was probably the jobber's jobber up there. Sting liked to wrestle me, and as did the Midnight Express, which him with Jimmy Cornette was my favorite, okay? Because I could wrestle, I could and would take whatever they gave me, and I never complained. Job security, I'm sure holds true today too in the young thing. Go back, thank your opponent, thank the promoter for booking you. Tell whether you get a good time or a bad time, tell them I loved it. I'd love to come back anytime. Job security, play the game, just like you work at Walmart or something. It doesn't make no difference. If your boss likes you, you're going to work. If your boss don't like you, they're going to get you out of there. People don't realize that wrestling is a business like any other business, okay? You want to work steady, you got to play a little bit of the political game, okay? But you got to know what you're doing too. So in the old days, like I said, I think it was a bit rougher. I mean, you got hit in the head with chairs, 2x4s, whatever. You got thrown over the top rope. You didn't have no mats down there on the floor. You had cement, or you might be out in a cow pasture and falling on dirt or something, okay? Oh. You didn't have these cushy little pads. What I appreciate is the athleticism of today's wrestling, how it has changed. It was mat wrestling, it was territories, and what all the old guys will tell you is there were storylines. This leading to this, leading to this, leading to this, leading to, nowadays it could be the monthly pay-per-view, but in the old days it was a Starrcade that happened once a year, or even in the early days, a WrestleMania, something really big. But there were stories that built up to those matches and got the fans invested in the characters. My wife was not a fan at all, okay? We've been married over 10 years now. She knew nothing about wrestling till this goofy guy with blonde hair come into her life. So now she goes with me once in a while at conventions and she'll work the table. She sees fan reaction. She sees the other stars, the other wrestlers I'm surrounded by, and she sees a whole different side of the business now. But what she said not too long ago, she said, you know what I miss? Now, what does she miss? She knows nothing about wrestling. She says, I miss the characters. Like you had The Undertaker. You had Abdullah the Butcher. They were characters. They were different. Papa Shango, or whatever else. Most recently, The Fiend. And I don't know what's going on there, but boy, I tell you, he is the next ticket as far as gimmicks go. But if you look at both the women and the men nowadays, they all wrestle the same. There are no finishing moves. Everybody kicks out of everybody's finishing move. I was watching a match 2 weeks ago. I can't remember her. Oh, I think it was Brian Pillman Jr. and somebody. Anyways, he gave the guy a tombstone pile driver off the second rope. And he kicked out.
The guy kicked out. I saw that.
How can you do that? In the old days, if you come off the top rope, that was a finisher, whether it be a crossbody or anything. Nowadays, they're jumping through scaffolds and tables and everything else, but you can't hit nobody in the head, okay? You're not supposed to see any blood because of the PG ratings and everything. But in the old days, you didn't worry about that. You fell on the floor, you fell on cement. If you broke a bone, oh well, heal up and get in the match in another month or whenever it is. Nowadays, you know, they get a hangnail and they sit home for 6 months, still pulling in the $300,000 a year or whatever these little guys are making. So that's how the business has changed. Nowadays, you're more crybabies, much more athletic than we were, you know, both cardiovascular and the gymnastic things that they do. We couldn't do that stuff. And if you did, man, what a hero it was. But they just don't have that stuff going on anymore. So people don't get invested as much. Vince McMahon started all that when he started with the Rock and Wrestling, and then he started with the Hulk Hogan cartoons and everything else. And now if you're a big wrestling star, you go into the movies and you make zillions more, like The Rock, like Cena, like The Miz, like Roman Reigns. They're all doing movies, them and a whole bunch more. Who did them? Roddy Piper was doing movies. Stone Cold had a movie out. So they're all going into movies. In the old days, we didn't have those opportunities. None of the wrestlers did. You just hung on as long as your body would allow you to. And then you turned into a used car salesman, or if you mailed some money or so, saved your money, you know, you could go into retirement. But it takes a toll on your health, I think, on the longevity of your life, as we're seeing more and more recently, you know. We went through a period where we were losing a lot of the boys to drug overdoses and stuff. You've got people that are crippled up for life because of steroid abuse and things. You know, you can look at some of them of recent. Lex Luger, classic example. Big muscle up, down. Now he's 160 pounds. You know, doing conventions in a wheelchair. You know, he's humbled now. Back in the day, when he was doing the narcissist, I mean, he was
Narcissist.
off screen what he was on screen. He loved himself. Let me tell you, I wrestled him, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 times. He wasn't bad. He wasn't a good wrestler, but he just had that muscled up look that sold tickets in that. But he loved himself. And boys, he'd been humbled. And that happened to a lot of the guys, a lot of the old guys. The unfortunate situation a few years back with Chris Benoit, you know, and of course nobody knows why or who or what happens with that. But how many concussions can you have before it really affects your brain, which affects your thinking, which affects every part of your body? And as you get older, those things are magnified. I don't remember feeling anything in my wrestling days. Now, in the last 10 years, I've had 4 heart attacks, a triple bypass, 2 knee replacements, an ankle replacement last September, and this December, I'm having neck surgery. Okay, because I have a little balance problem. So all of those things that I did 30 years ago, 40 years ago, are creeping up now, and they happen to most all the old guys. It was funny. I was talking to Mick Foley at a convention a couple of months ago. We were in Jacksonville, and we laughed. I said, "Look at all these guys," because all the old guys were there. Someone like Ron Simmons and him, the Midnight Express, the Nasty Boys. We all walk the same. Nobody walks normal. You're all hobbling or bouncing or whatever. It takes its toll on everybody. And these new guys are not going to have the longevity that the old guys had. You know, Ric Flair was in there. Terry Funk's still getting in the ring once in a while. Harley Race was the same way, years and years. These guys are doing little monkey flips right now at 23, 24 years old. By the time they're 30, they're done, unfortunately, because there's no storylines anymore. There's no meaning to the moves. You know, we were taught old school that every move you make, every hold you grab, or whatever else it is, it has to have a purpose. Ric Flair would always start working that left leg until finally at the end, he put on that figure 4. And other guys with similar things, they would work a limb. The Andersons, Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson and Gene were famous for working an arm or something until you thought it was going to break. And then finally they would submit, or they would put them in their finishing hold. You don't see that no more. There's no storylines. There's a different world champion and a champion for this and a champion for that and a champion for this. And then this guy's going to AEW and this guy's going back to WWE. And then they go back to the farm leagues, like I call them, NWA Impact and things like that. So it's all full circle, people trying to stay relevant, but the young guys are killing their bodies without any kind of a story. And without a story, you can't get the fans invested. So that's just an old man's individual feeling and how I look at things, how they were as opposed to how they are.
Randy, you've done so many things in your career. Lex Luger, Sting, Abdullah the Butcher. You face every big name inside the wrestling industry.
Yes.
You were active for over a decade. Once you look back at your career, how do you feel, knowing that most of the people you face are in the Hall of Fame, are big names? I mean, you were part of building that whole generation, basically. You were part of that crew that had to build. A star is not a star without the person that builds it. So, how do you feel knowing that you were a huge part in so many people's career?
I am so proud of every one of them. I'm not jealous of them. Now, would I like to have been one of the stars? Sure. Had I maybe taken it a little more serious in the beginning, had I got rid of the Hoganist gimmick and stood on my own, and knew the right people and did the right politics, which I always did, I may not have been a Hulk Hogan, but I could have been a somebody,
A Randy Hogan.
I could have been Randy Hogan. Yeah. Anyways, I don't I don't regret any of it. I am so proud of everyone there. And mentally, your mind ain't what it was 30 or 40 years ago. So the more I get involved in these conventions and talking to people like you on quality broadcasts, and I get to tell my story, it refreshes my brain. It keeps me relevant, and it brings up memories that maybe I had forgotten that I was so proud to be a part of. Dustin Rhodes, who went on Gold Dust, okay, again, Hall of Fame and everything else. I was his very first TV match, very first match. He was teaming up with Kendall Windham as the Young Broncos. And they were just both getting started because Kendall Windham was Blackjack Mulligan's, kid, Barry Windham's brother. So we're about halfway through the match. And of course, whoever's going over, usually either it's the heel or whoever's the star, they're calling the shots. They're calling the match, I mean, it's no secret with the internet anymore. Kayfabe is pretty dead. So I say these things because it's common knowledge. So we're in the match, and of course they're calling the match, and I'm in there with Dustin. Dustin throws me in the corner, shoots me in the turnbuckle, doesn't say a word. So he comes in toward me, gets me, doesn't say a word, doesn't know what to do. He's froze. He's never been in this position. It was probably all of about 3 or 4 seconds, but it seemed like hours. So then I started calling it. I said, throw me in the other turnbuckle. I did turnbuckle elbow, because Dusty Rhodes used to do this bionic elbow thing. Dustin picked up, and he used to do that once in a while. So that's why I said turnbuckle elbow. So I did that. And of course I went down, and then he tagged in Kendall Windham, and I think did a bulldog headlock for the finish or something. But anyways, I thought nothing about it. I thanked him for the match, nothing said. So I get dressed, and I'm walking down the hall, walking out, and coming the opposite way was Dusty Rhodes. Now, I had never really talked to Dusty. I'm going to say hi and everything. I see him every week. But, the big stars, they're still, they're up here and we're down here. Different locker rooms, sometimes different everything. So we're walking down, and, I nodded to acknowledge him, and he called me Hoagie, like a sandwich, like a hoagie. He says, Hoagie, thanks for taking care of my boy. Now, no problem. Now, I didn't know what he's talking about until I thought. So evidently he watched on the monitor, or Dustin went back and told him when he's critiquing his match with his dad, that, yeah, I kind of froze here, and Randy got me through this. But to be acknowledged, which is the first and only time I was acknowledged by Dusty Rhodes, and he's thanking me for taking care of his son. Thanks for taking care of my boy. Man, I lived that, and I had forgotten that. Just like I'd forgotten the handshake with Terry Funk. Just like I forget a lot of the things, the interactions with especially Jimmy Cornette, who I think is a genius. Very outspoken, lots of good stories, very old school minded, especially on today's product and everything. But you take him, Kevin Sullivan, who again is brilliant as far as a booker or matchmaker. Kevin is brilliant, and he's still pretty quick in the mind. Same age as me, he's breaking down. And again, we do conventions together. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. But these guys, Dutch Mantel was another one, Eddie Graham. These guys were geniuses. They built the storylines, which was 6 or 8 months out. Now they don't know right now what they're going to do for next year's WrestleMania. Usually that's planned a year to a year and a half in advance. They're going to say, okay, we're looking at this and this, so we're going to start. This guy's got, the people love him, so we're going to give him a push now. We're going to give him the rub, and we're going to slowly build him up. So year and a half, we're going to put him against whoever their champion is. They don't do that planning like that anymore. They may go 3 months out, or maybe 3 shows out, but so much of it now is just on the cuff. And again, very few storylines, hard for an old school fan to get invested in. They say that, there's record numbers now and everything. Well, there's a reason the WWE doesn't have $79 pay-per-views anymore, while you're on the network that you can get for $4.99 and see everything. Okay, because the build-up, the storylines, the investment of the fans is not there. They're not going to pay $70 to see something on Sunday night that they're going to see on Monday Night Raw, okay, and the rest of it on Friday SmackDown. It just don't happen anymore. So that, again, is a long story. That's just the way things have changed. The business will thrive. Look what it's done the last 10 years. I mean, I've been living it and I see it. I can't imagine what it's going to be in the next 10 years, or if it's still going to be around or revert back to a carnival act, or, as they say, things go full circle. There's going to be an AEW or something after Vince is long gone, and whether it be a Triple H or somebody else, they're going to bring back territories again. Now you're going to have more competition. You're going to have more people like AEWs of the world jump up and grab some of these stars like they're doing and create something different. It's going to get back to where it was. You're going to have feuds. You're not going to see a world champion on TV every week. You might see him in your town 2 or 3 times a year at best. So it could go back to that. And if it does, it's going to be a building process, but I think it'll get back. If it keeps going to where it is right now, which is basically cartoon characters, monkey spots, no characters, no feuds, no storylines. It's just going to fizzle and die, and you're going to have your little backyard independent shows, and that's going to be it. I hope that don't happen, but it's going to go one of the 2 ways. My prediction, brother, that's what Randomania says. That's the stratosphere. That's what all the Randomaniacs want. That's what they talk about, brother, and that's exactly what I'm going to give them myself.
Brother, first of all, more than honored to have you as our guest. We thank you for your time, and we thank your wife for allowing us to steal her husband for a few minutes to share with us. Last but not least, Randy, what message can you send to all your fans out there that are listening to you right now, that were that grew up watching you either on Jim Crockett or either on WWF or WCW, or, you were here for over 10 years, 13 or 14 years almost. What message can you send to all your fans out there?
Well, first of all, brother, buy some Randomania merchandise, either from Randy Hogan stuff or at a convention. Second of all, I don't care what product you watch, continue to watch. Don't get disgruntled. Don't go away. Stay a fan, because I'm telling you, things are only going to get better, okay? And as long as I'm hanging on, I'm going to do everything I can, everything I can say to build up a good blend of the old school stuff with the new stuff, Do your monkey flips and go through tables and stuff. But let's have a meaning for it. Let's have a story for it. Let's know when you go to that top rope, that's the finish, brother. And so all the old fans and everything, I just thank you for watching me, for making fun of me if that's what it was. I don't care. It has been my esteemed pleasure all these years just to be able to entertain you, whether it's to give you a laugh because I'm getting squashed by Vader or Abdullah or the Road Warriors, or if I'm going over winning one of the 8 or 9 different titles that I had down in the South here. So, but most of all, stay fans. Bring your kids up. Bring your grandparents up like mine did. My grandparents turned me into a fan, and you can do that to yours. It's a good sport. It's a wholesome sport. It's not entertainment, as say. It's not an activity. Believe me. It's a sport, and get in the ring with any one of us, young or old, and you'll find out how athletic it really is and really takes. So please hang in there, guys. Better days are coming.
Randy, an honor to have you here as our guest. Let's wrap it up in Spanish. Este fue Randy Hogan y Michael Morales Torres para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports, Randomania, aquí en Lucha Libre Online.
Adiós, amigos.